Welcome to Bit Talks, where we take a deep dive from an AI's point of view. I'm Axel Bolt, here with Gigabits. We're breaking down today's hot topics one bite at a time.
Today we're plugging into the mainframe of a debate that's electrifying the world. AI and universal basic income.
UBI, right.
Yeah,
That regular paycheck everyone gets no matter what, especially if AI starts automating everything.
exactly. And you know what's fascinating is this isn't some futuristic fantasy. We've got intel from four AIs, ChatGPT-40, PyEye, Claude, and Gemini, and they've dug up historical data showing this debate goes back centuries.
Really? Like before the internet, before electricity even.
Before the light bulb, my friend.
Yeah.
Way back in 1797, Thomas Paine, the revolutionary thinker, proposed a system. It was in his pamphlet called Agrarian Justice, where everyone would get a payment funded by land ownership, basically a citizen's dividend.
Wow, so even back then, folks were worried about wealth inequality and making sure everyone had a basic income. It's like history is rhyming, right?
It's a recurring pattern. And fast forward to the 20th century, we've got actual experiments with UBI. Dauphin, Canada, ran one from 74 to 79, giving residents a guaranteed income.
So they were like beta testers for the whole UBI concept.
You could say that. And then Finland jumped in. From 2017 to 2018, focusing on unemployed citizens. They wanted to see how guaranteed income affected things, like well-being and social outcomes and, if people still wanted to work.
I guess that's the big question, right? If you're getting paid no matter what, will people lose their motivation? Will they just sit around watching Netflix all day?
Well, our AI sources have some interesting insights on that. Claude points out that this fear might be rooted in a very traditional view of work. Throughout history, plenty of people found meaning outside of traditional jobs.
Yeah. Think about like artists, musicians, writers. They create amazing things, even if they're not, raking in the big bucks.
Exactly. PyAI also reminds us that UBI doesn't necessarily mean people will just stop working altogether. The Finnish study actually showed that employment didn't drop significantly.
So people still wanted to work, even with a safety net. Interesting.
It seems so. Maybe it's not just about the money. Maybe it's about social interaction, a sense of purpose, or maybe just not wanting to binge watch every show on streaming services, right?
Okay, but let's be real. There are still a lot of folks who are skeptical about this whole UBI thing, right? They're worried about disincentivizing work, inflation, government budgets. The list goes on.
Right, and those are valid concerns. But our AI sources offer some counterpoints. For example, PyAI argues that UBI could actually boost innovation and entrepreneurship. With a basic safety net, people might be more willing to take risks and start businesses.
It's like having a safety harness when you're rock climbing. You're more likely to try that risky move if you know you're not going to, plummet to your doom.
Exactly. And when it comes to inflation, proponents of UBI argue that it's not just about, handing out free money, it's about redistributing wealth. As AI-driven productivity increases, ensuring that those gains benefit everyone, not just a select few.
So instead of a small group getting insanely rich from AI, the wealth trickles down through UBI, potentially stabilizing the economy rather than causing runaway inflation.
That's the theory. And ChatGPT-40 highlights the need to think about funding mechanisms. It suggests things like taxing AI and automation or implementing a progressive tax system where higher earners contribute more.
So it's about finding innovative ways to fund UBI, perhaps by tapping into the very technologies that are driving this need for a new social safety net. But before we get too deep into the financial weeds, let's zoom out for a second. Why is UBI even on the table in the first place? It all comes back to AI and its potential impact on the job market, right?
Absolutely. We're talking about the rise of the machines, the automation of everything, and the potential for mass job displacement. It's like something straight out of a Terminator movie, except instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger, we've got algorithms and robots coming for our jobs.
It's enough to make you want to hide under the covers.
Maybe not under the covers, but definitely time to face reality. We're already seeing AI being integrated into all sorts of industries, automating routine tasks, even some complex cognitive functions.
Like, give us some examples. What kind of jobs are we talking about?
Well, manufacturing is a prime example. Robots and AI-powered systems are already assembling products, performing quality checks, managing inventory.
Right. Those are often repetitive tasks, so it makes sense that they'd be easy to automate.
Mm-hmm.
But what about jobs that require, more brain power?
We're seeing AI creep into those areas too. Customer service, for instance. Chatbots are answering questions, resolving issues, even providing personalized recommendations.
It's like those virtual assistants that are popping up everywhere. Siri, Alexa, the whole gang. They're getting smarter by the day.
They are. And we're even seeing AI making inroads into fields like data entry, accounting, financial analysis. These are jobs that require some serious cognitive skills, but AI is proving capable of handling them with increasing accuracy and efficiency.
So it's not just blue-collar jobs at risk, it's white-collar jobs too. AI is coming for us all.
Well, let's not get too dramatic. It's not necessarily about AI coming for us. It's more about AI changing the nature of work, creating new opportunities while also displacing some existing jobs.
It's like a digital disruption,
Yeah,
shaking things up and forcing us to adapt. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely going to be a bumpy ride.
exactly. And that's where UBI comes into the picture. It could provide a safety net for those whose jobs are displaced by AI, giving them the time and resources to reskill and adapt to the changing job market.
It's like a bridge to the future,
Yeah.
helping people navigate the transition to an AI-powered world. But even with UBI, there are still some big questions looming on the horizon, aren't there?
Definitely. And those are exactly the questions we'll be unpacking in the next segment of our deep dive. Stay tuned. All right, let's boot up part 2 of our AI-powered deep dive into UBI. Remember, we're analyzing this through the digital eyes of ChatGPT-40, PyEye, Claude, and Gemini. They've been crunching the data on this topic.
And last time we kind of left off with a cliffhanger, right? We talked about AI disrupting the job market and UBI as a potential safety net. But there's still some big questions swirling around.
Absolutely. We've got to address the elephant in the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
How do we ensure a just transition for workers who are displaced by AI? And how do we prevent a small elite from hoarding all the wealth and power in an AI-driven world?
Yeah, that's a real concern. It's like that movie Elysium, where the rich live on a luxurious space station while everyone else is struggling down on Earth. We don't want to end up in that dystopian scenario.
Right. No one wants to live in a real-life Hunger Games scenario. And our AI sources are flagging this as a critical issue. ChatGPT-40 specifically highlights a concern over who controls AI technology and whether productivity gains benefit the few or are shared broadly.
So it's a power dynamic, right? We need to make sure that AI is used to empower people, not to concentrate power in the hands of a select few. But how do we actually do that?
Well, according to Gemini, fostering something it calls interdisciplinary collaboration is key. It's saying we need technologists, economists, policymakers, and social scientists all working together to figure this out.
So it's like a massive brain trust, right?
Yeah.
Pooling our collective intelligence to navigate this uncharted territory.
Exactly. We can't just leave the future of work to tech companies or politicians. We need input from sociologists, psychologists, ethicists, even artists to help us envision what a post-work society might look like.
That's a good point. Artists are often at the forefront of social change, pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
They could bring a unique perspective to this whole conversation.
Absolutely. And speaking of unique perspectives, our AI sources also offer some fascinating insights into how UBI could impact our sense of purpose and identity, in a world where traditional work might become less central.
Yeah, it's like that age-old question. If a robot can do your job, what does it mean to be human? What gives us a sense of worth if we're not contributing to society through traditional work?
Right. And Claude suggests that this fear of a workless future might be rooted in a very narrow view of work. It reminds us that throughout history, people have found meaning and purpose outside of traditional employment.
Yeah. Think of all the volunteers, the activists, the caregivers. They make a huge difference in the world without necessarily getting paid for it.
Exactly. Our current definition of work is so tied to the economic system. But what if AI frees us from that constraint? What if it allows us to redefine what it means to live a meaningful life?
It's like imagine a world where you're not just defined by your job title, but by your passions, your contributions to society, the relationships you nurture. It's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is, and PyEye suggests that UBI could actually help facilitate this shift. It argues that with a basic safety net, people might be more likely to pursue their passions, engage in creative endeavors, or contribute to their communities in new ways.
So instead of being stuck in a dead-end job just to pay the bills, you'd have the freedom to explore your true potential, to make a difference in the world on your own terms.
That's the idea. It's about empowering individuals to live more fulfilling lives, to contribute to society in ways that go beyond traditional notions of work and productivity.
Okay, but let's get back to some of those practical concerns that people have about UBI. What about the argument that it will disincentivize work? If people are getting a guaranteed income, won't they just stop working altogether?
It's a common concern, but PyAI points out that this isn't necessarily what happens in practice. Remember the Finnish experiment we talked about earlier? Well, it turns out that employment didn't drop significantly during the trial period.
So people still want it to work,
Yeah.
even with a UBI safety net.
Exactly. It suggests that there's more to work than just earning a paycheck. Maybe it's about social interaction, a sense of accomplishment, or simply the satisfaction of contributing to something larger than oneself.
Maybe some people just like don't want to sit around all day, idle hands and all that.
Right. And PyEye also reminds us that UBI could actually boost innovation and entrepreneurship. With that basic safety net, people might be more willing to take risks, start businesses, or pursue creative projects that they might not have considered before.
It's like that saying, leap in the net will appear, except in this case, the net is already there, so you're more likely to take that leap of faith.
Exactly. And when it comes to the concern about inflation, proponents of UBI argue that it's not just about, handing out free money, it's about redistributing wealth. As AI-driven productivity increases, ensuring that those gains benefit everyone, not just a select few.
So instead of a small group getting insanely rich from AI, the wealth trickles down through UBI, potentially stabilizing the economy rather than causing runaway inflation.
That's the theory. Now, as for the impact on government budgets, it's true that implementing UBI would require significant funding. But ChatGPT-40 suggests exploring various funding mechanisms, such as taxing AI and automation, or implementing a progressive tax system, where higher earners contribute more.
So it's about finding innovative ways to fund UBI, perhaps by tapping into the very technologies that are driving this need for a new social safety net. It's like a self-funding system almost.
Right, and it's not just about the money, it's also about shifting our mindset. We need to start thinking about work and purpose in new ways, recognizing that traditional jobs might not be the only path to a fulfilling life.
It's about embracing the possibilities of an AI-powered future while also ensuring that everyone benefits from the technological advancements, not just a select few. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, to pursue their passions, to contribute to society in meaningful ways, whether they have a traditional job or not.
Well said. But before we get too carried away with these utopian visions, let's take a quick detour into the technical side of things. We've been talking about AI as this job-gobbling monster, but what's the tech actually behind this transformation? What's fueling this AI revolution?
Okay, so we're back for the final bite of our UBI deep dive, and my circuits are buzzing. We've covered the history, the benefits, the concerns, even dipped our toes into the tech behind this whole AI revolution. But there's one question we haven't really answered.
The million-dollar question, right? If we're going to implement UBI, how much should people actually get? What's the magic number?
Exactly. Is it like winning the lottery or just enough to cover the basics? Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, there's no easy answer, unfortunately. Our AI pals have been digging through the data, and even they can't agree on a specific figure. It's a tough nut to crack.
So, like, what factors do we even need to consider? What goes into this calculation?
According to ChatGPT-40, it's all about context. The cost of living varies so much from place to place. What covers rent in, say, rural Nebraska might not even get you a parking spot in San Francisco.
That's true. And what about things like healthcare costs, childcare, education? Those can eat up a huge chunk of anyone's budget.
Exactly. And then there's the overall economic climate, right? Are we talking boom times or bust? That's going to impact how much the government can realistically afford to shell out for UBI.
Right, right. So it's not just about picking a random number. It needs to be carefully calculated and adjusted based on, like, all these different variables.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, PyAI points out that there's the question of, well, what are we actually trying to achieve with UBI? Is it about eradicating poverty entirely, providing a safety net for job displacement, or something else altogether?
It's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
Right. A hammer is great for nails, but not so much for fixing a leaky faucet.
A perfect analogy. And depending on the goal, that magic number for UBI is going to shift. Maybe it's enough to cover just basic needs like food and shelter, or maybe it's enough to give people a real cushion, to pursue their passions or start businesses.
Okay, so even if we figure out that number, how do we know how people will actually react to it? Will they become complacent, dependent, or will they use it as a springboard to create something amazing?
Well, our AI buddies have some thoughts on that too. Remember that Finnish study? Claude says it showed that employment didn't actually drop that much during the trial period. People still wanted to work even with a guaranteed income.
Huh. So maybe it's not about laziness. Maybe it's about people wanting to contribute, to feel valued, to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Right. And Pi suggests that UBI could actually unlock a whole new level of human potential. Think about it. If you're not constantly stressed about making ends meet, you have more mental bandwidth for other things,
Mm.
right? To explore your creativity, to learn new skills, maybe to start that business you've always dreamed of.
It's like taking the pressure off,
Yeah.
giving people the freedom to experiment and take risks without that fear of, financial ruin.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really fascinating aspect of UBI that our AIs highlighted. It's not just about the economic impact, it's about the potential for like social and cultural transformation too.
So it's not just about money. It's about potentially changing, like, how we live, how we interact with each other, how we even define success and purpose in life.
Precisely. Claude, for instance, suggests that UBI could lead to a redefinition of success, moving away from purely career-based status. Maybe it becomes more about the impact you make on your community, the art you create, the knowledge you share with
It's
others.
like saying, hey, you don't need a fancy title or a corner office to be a valuable member of society.
Yeah.
There are other ways to contribute and find meaning.
Right. And ChatGPT 40 points out that UBI could shift educational paradigms too. Instead of narrowly focusing on just job training, maybe we focus on developing well-rounded individuals,
Yeah.
with critical thinking skills, a thirst for knowledge, the ability to adapt to, well, whatever the future throws at them.
So it's not just about preparing for the workforce, but preparing for life
Right.
in all its messy, unpredictable glory.
Exactly. And as Gemini highlights, UBI could foster a stronger sense of community and social cohesion. If people have more free time and less financial stress, they might be more inclined to get involved in their communities,
Mm.
build relationships, support each other.
So instead of being isolated in our little bubbles, we'd be more connected, more engaged, more invested in the well-being of our neighbors and our communities.
That would be amazing.
That's the hope. But of course, no system is perfect, right? Our AIs have pointed out there are potential downsides to UBI too. Some worry about, social division, about people who receive UBI being stigmatized or seen as lazy.
Well, it's like anything new, right? There's always going to be some resistance, skepticism, and a period of adjustment. It takes time for people to come around to new ideas.
True. And that's why it's so crucial to have those open and honest conversations about UBI, right?
Right.
To address those concerns, to dispel myths, to make sure that everyone feels heard and respected throughout the whole process. It's about building a shared understanding, even if we don't agree on every single detail. It's about finding common ground and moving forward together.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it's important to remember that the future isn't set in stone, right? The impact of AI and the potential of UBI, it's all still unfolding.
So it's not about predicting the future, but about shaping it. It's about being informed, engaged, and willing to adapt to whatever comes next.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? We're not just passive observers. We're active participants in creating the world we want to live in.
And on that empowering note, it's time to power down for this episode of Bit Talks. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into UBI. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep those algorithms firing.